Imagine, if you will, or allow me, the sound of my voice to be exact, paint you a lovely small tale about my sweet, fluffy brown companion with a small tail, complete with the cutest smile and nose, has the world underneath her paws, and she doesn't even know. No one teaches her or answers her curious little concerns, except for the lotus flower and her butterfly friend. When the sun goes to bed and the moon lights her way, she gets to hear a new lesson from the day. As the sun left and the moon rised, Sapphire tucked into bed, pretending to go to sleep as her mother cut out the lights to the family's burrows and hopped to bed herself. Waiting a few moments for the signal, a small beam of light began to peek through the burrow. Sapphire quietly hopped out of bed and left the burrow once again, hopping down to the crossroads down the blue sparkled path to Micah's garden. She quietly hopped to where the lotus and butterfly appeared in the middle of the huge pond in the center of the garden. Hopping a bit closer to the edge, looking into the clear water for a moment before closing her eyes, remembering the sight of the lotus blooming before her. Just as soon as she opened her eyes, bubbles could be seen and heard forming and popping in the center of the huge pond, while a deep purple ball started to rise to the surface, breaking the thin layer of water, finally revealing itself. Sapphire hopped back to allow the lotus to unravel itself one by one, overpowering the pond's circumference once again. "You may enter now, young one," the lotus whispered. Sapphire carefully hopped onto one of the lotus petals, hopping by a few open spaces that used to be covered with her petals, on her way to the center. The butterfly in its usual resting place, its wings a lovely deep orange, before changing into a book flying open to the Five of Pentacles, with the words written in red and white. Red walls and white roads never change to one of a true sight, no matter how it appears to another. The lotus began her story. On a crystal clear day in a town of only two colors, red and white, no one questioned the town's colors as they always grew up around them, but that's not the only thing that's mildly strange in this small town. No matter how the sun set or the moon rose, the streets were always white, the walls were always red, never shifting or changing. The people of the town were amazed and were very proud of their unique little imperfection. So much so, people began to worship its unique features, building a faith that the streets were blessed and never would fade or lose its color. So much so that once a year, 6 men of true faith and devotion are chosen to walk the streets when the sun is at its brightest, to pray for its continuation of its magical nature. At high noon, the men began their walk through the town's pure white streets together, humming and chanting, praising the streets, when suddenly a cloud blew past the sun, very briefly covering a corner of it, causing its once white streets to turn a soft pink color. 5 of the men stopped in the middle of chanting in disbelief. This was the first time this has ever occurred in 500 years since the tradition has started. Their faith shattered, they began to run back to the townspeople to inform them of the awful events that took place. Except one man, a reformed monk who moved there previously a couple years back. He continued to chant and hum even louder than before, and kept walking the streets as though nothing occurred. The men, confused, turned around to tell the townspeople. Returning to the town square with their heads in shame to deliver the news of the unfortunate events. "The streets are no longer pure," one of the men stepped forward, taking his hat off. Gasps filled the air. "They turned pink right before our very eyes," another chimed in, placing a hand on the man's shoulders, hanging his head in shame. Silence quickly swallowed the gasps as the spirit of faith slowly left the town, until one little girl with glitter in her hair spoke up, pulling away from her mother to approach the men. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, she counted. "But weren't there 6 of you?" she asked. "Yes." The 6th man appeared behind the men, smiling. "And the streets never changed," he said, towards the crowd, taking a small, pure white pebble from his pocket, showing everyone. Kneeling down in front of the little girl and handed her the pebble, the one he took from the end of the road after he finished his chanting and humming. It was resting in front of his feet when he opened his eyes. The lotus finished. "How did the monk change the streets back to white?" Sapphire said. "He didn't. A path of white with red walls. Sometimes the road isn't always going to be white. One day you might find yourself on a pink path, and everyone that started walking with you when the path was white will start to turn around and go, losing their sight of a once clear path, sometimes even try to attempt to have you turn around as well. But one with true certainty of themselves and path cannot be pulled away regardless of how said path distorts itself. Said individual doesn't listen to the voice of different sounds, not relying within his own mind. One keeps his faith and continues down the pink path, understanding that even though his physical sight sees pink, his mind sees white. So he continues on his physical journey, seeing his clear path in his mind. While some lose their faith at the first attempt of their sight being challenged. The lotus finished the story as the sun rays began to peek over the huge bushes that sat on Micah's garden. "Go now, young bunny. A new lesson awaits at moonrise." The lotus humming softly as another petal suddenly caught flames, burning bright yet finished very quickly, turning to ash. The ashes mimicked snow as it fell into the water between the already missing petals from previous times. Sapphire, saddened yet amazed at the brief but amazing display, thanked the lotus and the butterfly for their time once again, before turning to hop quietly back home. Quietly hopping home out of Micah's garden that she wasn't really supposed to be in. Down the blue sparkled path to the crossroads into the family's burrow, quickly and swiftly getting into bed as birds started to sing their morning song. Sapphire fell asleep quickly and dreamt about holding her mother's hand with pretty fresh glitter in her hair, waiting for her father to come back from his yearly walk of the pure white streets. Imagine if